Hello everybody, welcome back to another tips and tricks video. Today we're going to do the first of a three-part series. We're going to be talking about graphic settings. Now in this particular video, we're going to be showing you the settings that I have for my main gaming and streaming setup. It is running a 4070 Ti Super, so not exactly the lowest end hardware, but of course not exactly the highest end hardware either. And I'm going to show you my settings here toward the end of the video. So if all you really care about is my settings, then of course you can just go ahead and jump to the timestamp to that below. But the rest of this video is going to be running through a loop that is going to compare to the other two segments in this three-part series where we talk about graphic settings. In the second video, we're going to be running through this and talking about the settings that I have worked up that I have found work very well for a low-end system that is basically a mini PC. It's running an AMD APU, a CPU and a GPU combination, and is basically pulling about 65 watts from the wall and can literally fit in the palm of your hand. It's absolutely perfect for a small living room setup, or maybe someone who is traveling and doesn't want to have a laptop. Well, they can easily hook this up to, let's say, a hotel PC when they get to wherever they're traveling. They can use a wireless keyboard and mouse and have a little fun with respect to some light gaming while they're out on the road. All three systems will basically use the exact same save game and will be running through about a 12-minute loop of various gameplay as we walk around the farm here. We tab into particular vehicles, look around those vehicles. Now, sadly, with my main gaming system here, I was doing some testing with some head tracking. I've ultimately ended up turning off the head tracking because I didn't like how I obviously kept looking to my left every time I looked for chat and things, and I didn't really like how that ultimately looked on the screen. And I sit fairly close to my displays, about an arm's length away from three 32-inch displays. As a result, well, if I want to look at the clock, if I want to look at the HUD down in the corner, if I want to look at the F1 screen, my eyes are kind of all over the place, and the eye tracking with that particular software, well, it was causing the view to go up and down and around. It basically was as if the whole thing was wandering all over the place. And for me, it was distracting. I can expect it was distracting for others as well, and that's why we basically just turned that off at this point. I need to back a few settings out, that way I can actually, kind of look around with a mouse here on this tractor. But for now, we're just going to do it this way. Like I said, we're going to try to do the same loop across all three settings, all three systems. And then the third video is going to be with an AMD handheld gaming system. So these have been fairly popular in the last few years because the AMD APUs have been fairly powerful for basic gaming, and with some of the upscaling techniques, well, you can actually do some pretty decent gaming on AAA titles as well. Not saying that Farm Sim is a AAA title, but it does have a bit more GPU requirements than maybe some of the older lighter end games that you might find out there in the market today. We're going to make our way over here to the town. We're going to drive through town a little bit. Make our way over to Central Cafe. We're going to take a look at some textures. But again, that third video is going to take a look at an handheld gaming system running Farm Sim on battery. And you're going to see that with my settings, I'm using about 25 watts of power between the CPU and GPU. That's about as low as I could get the power without really sacrificing frame rates too terrible much. And we'll talk more about that during that particular video. But again, this is kind of the baseline. This is exactly how I run my setup when I'm streaming, when I'm recording. All of my videos are set up this way. I don't use any sort of additional textures, reshade, or anything like that on my system. So if you pretty much repeat the settings that I am using, then you should have pretty equivalent results visually with respect to what we see here in this video. Now, if you do go in and use my settings, I would be curious to know how they look for you, how the system is running, what resolution are you running at, be that 1080p, 1440p, or 4K, and then what is your GPU of choice. We're going to make our way down to the ferry at this point. And then once we get across the ferry, we're going to make our way kind of back over to the main farm. All of these settings are with the current version of the game as of the recording of this video, which is version 1.4. Now, there were some graphical issues in the initial release of the game. Some people were seeing, including myself, some flashing textures, sometimes of the background, sometimes of the trees, but that was resolved fairly quick with the first patch, and I think Giants has done a good job with respect to further graphic enhancements and optimizations in the subsequent patch as well. I'll go ahead and pull up my frame rate counter here. On the other videos, you will see that we do have an overlay showing us our CPU usage, our GPU usage, our frame count, as well as our power usage. I don't have any overlays set up on this particular system, so we're just going to have to deal with the Giants frame counter up here in the upper right. And as I'm going to mention when we get to the GPU settings, these aren't necessarily the optimal or highest settings possible with respect to this particular GPU, which again is a 4070 Ti Super. The reason for that is because as a content creator, I need to leave some GPU headroom to encode videos like we're recording here, or to encode streams when I'm streaming, because I record at 1440p, I stream at 1440p, and I want to have enough headroom with respect to gameplay to allow me to record at a nice solid 60 FPS and stream at a nice solid 60 FPS. So if you have the exact same hardware that I have, and you're not streaming and you're not recording, then of course you could crank those settings a little bit more. You could also choose to run at maybe 90 frames per second, 120 frames per second, or 144 if you have a high refresh monitor. I'm choosing to lock everything down at 60 simply because it's just easier as a creator to do that. But I will admit that I do like my higher frames on other driving titles, but I often do lock those down as well. So for example, in ATS, I will lock that down to 90 visually because I find it easier to read the road screens or road signs at 90 FPS when driving, and I still stream at 60. Or in maybe racing titles, I will often set the frames to 120. Because really at that point, I don't really need to run unlocked frames. If I do go ahead and unlock the frames here, you can see that we're able to get to 90 FPS. Again, I am recording at the same time on the same GPU that I am playing on, and that is going to have some level of impact overall to the performance. Well, let me show you where we are on the map. We're coming across top of the map, just under south of field 25. We're going to hang a left here between fields 21 and 22. Where that car came out, we're going to make our way down to this small town that is just north of the farm. And then we're going to, well, finish our tour around at the farm. And then, of course, we're going to jump to a segment where we talk about our settings. If you want to go ahead and jump at any point in time, then I will have a timestamp to that down in the description. And here we are back to the farm. Like I said, go ahead and check out my second or third video in this three-part series if you are maybe interested in picking up a Windows gaming handheld system and you're curious on how Farm Sim looks or could look and perform on one of those systems, or maybe if your system struggles with respect to running a nice solid 60 FPS at 1080p, then by all means, my second video, which is going to be running Farm Sim on a small mini PC. Again, this thing fits in literally in the palm of your hand. It runs about 65 watts from the wall. A far cry from the power usage that the main gaming rig here is consuming. And you know what? It runs pretty darn good, and it looks okay compared to this. Not as good as this, definitely with respect to shadows and things, because we do have to make a few sacrifices, but it doesn't look all that bad. In fact, in that second video, we're going to run 2 loops, one with my recommended settings and one with Giants' default settings. And I think you're going to find my recommended settings look far, far better than the Giants' default settings. So let's go ahead and take a rundown through my GPU settings for, again, my main gaming rig, which is running a 4070 Ti Super at 1440p resolution. On my main gaming rig, I run a very high custom configuration. I play on a 1440p monitor, I stream at 1440p, and I record at 1440p, so that is what my screen resolution is set at. I also have VSync turned on. I know there's going to be comments about turning that off. I also have frame rate limited at 60, and the reason for that is I stream at 60 FPS, I record at 60 FPS, I don't need to drive more than 60 FPS on my monitor. Now, I do love my driving games with a higher refresh rate than that, but for Farm Sim, I have everything locked down to 60 because I just don't need to overdrive my GPU just so I see a few more frames on screen than what's being recorded or sent out to the stream. I play in windowed mode because I like to Alt-Tab out of the game and look at other screens and other things from time to time, either when I'm playing or in my recording or in my streaming. So that's why we have it set to windowed mode. Screen resolution scaling of 100%, brightness of 1, and in-game HUD, I think it's a little bit too big for my taste, so I shrink it down to 70%. Now, with respect to our advanced graphic settings, I am not going to go into detail as to exactly what each and every one of these settings means. This is the settings that I have set. This is what I like. This is what all my videos are recorded using. All of my streams are using this. If you like the quality of the videos, if you like the quality of the streams, then you can start with these settings and work from there with respect to you need to dial things back, or maybe can you crank things up a little bit more for your specific hardware. All of the draw distances I have set to 200. So it's going to be object, foliage draw distances, LED distance, train LED, and foliage LED all set to 200. Resolution scaling is set to 100%. Shader quality, very high. Shading rate, high. Screen space shading rate is set to off. Screen space reflections is set to very high. Screen space shadows is set to on. SSAO quality, very high. Atmospheric quality, very high. Volumetric fog quality, very high. Cloud shadows is turned to on. Terrain quality, very high. Texture resolution, high. And texture filtering, ANISO by 16. With respect to light quality is set to ultra. Lens flare is set to off. I don't like lens flare. I turn it off. Shadow quality, very high. Shadow distance quality is set to high. Soft shadows is set to on. And shadow map filtering is set to high. With respect to foliage shadows, well, I have them turned off. Realistic beacons turned on. Field of view 70%. First person field of view 60, third person field of view 40, 5 for max shadow lights, 5 for max mirrors, 400% on tire tracks, 200% on mesh tessellation. And then with respect to post-processing anti-aliasing, I have an NVIDIA GPU in my main system, so I'm using DLAA for anti-aliasing. Sharpness is set to 1, and then upscaling is turned off. So I do not use any upscaling on my main gaming setup. Now that, as you're going to see later, is going to be different for what I'm going to be suggesting for systems with maybe lower end graphics. So I hope this video has been helpful in some way. Again, part 2 of this is going to come out tomorrow if you're watching this on the day of release. And in that video, we're going to talk about running Farm Sim 25 on a APU from AMD, meaning that the CPU and GPU are all on the same package. Basically, a system with integrated graphics. And then the next day after that, we're going to talk about running Farm Sim 25 on a Windows gaming handheld. Now, it's running on a lower powered APU, even lower powered than the mini PC, which is going to be a part of the second video. And that's going to give you a little bit of an idea of how well Farm Sim 25 runs on a handheld gaming system like that running Windows. Now, a Linux variant of an handheld gaming system would, of course, be the Steam Deck. I don't have access to a Steam Deck in order to tell you how that is going to run, but the handheld Windows system is going to be fairly comparable with respect to gaming performance as compared to the Steam Deck. So if you're looking at getting a Steam Deck or an ROG Ally or an MSI Claw or any other number of potential Windows gaming handhelds, then that third video is going to be one that you're going to want to go and check out as well. Till next time, happy farming.